Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first virtual community conversation. My name is Jenny Rivera, and I am the Executive Director and CEO of Long Beach Opera. And I am sorry that we can't be in person for this conversation, but I am also grateful that the virtual platform allows us the opportunity to involve a lot more artists and audience members from around the country, or maybe even around the world if you're watching. I want to thank very, very much. I really want to thank the panelists, the artists, the keynote speaker, all of whom have agreed to participate in this, a really illustrious group. I want to thank Long Beach Opera's Board of Directors for continuing to support this work of equity diversity that we've been doing for the past couple of years. I want to thank the Music Academy of the West for providing the grant that's allowing us to do these programs. And I just want to say that we started focusing on the work of EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, more a couple of years ago when we premiered the Central Park 5 and started these community conversation programs. And I have learned so much. And one of the most important lessons I've learned is that when you do the work that is required to really make a concerted effort to understand where your organization is and where your industry is in this work, there'll be people who will acknowledge you and say, great job. And then there will be other people who will tell you that you're not doing enough. And what I've learned is that you really need to listen to the people who are telling you that you're not doing enough, because we're really far behind in the opera world and we have a long way to go. And so those people who are pointing out what more needs to be done, those people are right. And with that, I would like to introduce our Director of Equity and Engagement, Derrell Acon, who has curated and is going to be moderating this event, and who I believe is going to be one of the real change makers in the work of creating equity within the opera industry. So with that, I will send it over to you, Derrell.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. I am Derrell Acon. I am the Director of Engagement and Equity, and also the curator and moderator for today's panel discussion around equity and diversity in the arts. Today's discussion, for a lot of us, especially those of us who are Black or of color, is one that is going to be difficult, one that is going to be potentially emotional, but one that is absolutely needed. And I would say at this particular moment in our industry, one that is in fact critical that we have. Before I turn it over to some of the marvelous performances and presentations and discussions that we have, I want to just read a quotation to you, or not read, recite a quotation to you by one J. Saunders Redding, because I believe his thoughts help us understand why discussions like this, why artists like the ones we have with us today and their stories are so important. In 1951, J. Saunders Redding said the following, quote, "I hope this piece stands as the epilogue to whatever contribution I have made to the literature of the race. I want to get on to other things. I do not know whether I can make this clear, but the obligations imposed by race on the average educated or talented Negro, if this sounds immodest, it must, are vast and become at last onerous. I am tired of giving up my creative initiative to these demands. I think I am not alone," end quote. Although J. Saunders Redding was not alone and is still not alone in his beliefs that artists, Black artists or Asian artists or Hispanic artists shouldn't have to give up their creative initiative in order to further discussions on race and their positions and their racial groups' respective position in society, I contend that any effective artist must adhere to these demands in order for us all as a society to learn and grow from each other as a community. Therefore, I have decided that it is of utter importance that we include performances in today's discussion, because I believe that the arts, the performing arts especially, have an amazing ability to catalyze some of the most difficult conversations. The performing arts have the ability to clarify some of the most complex human emotions. And so we have the marvelous performances of some artists I really love and really enjoy and respect. The first one, we'll intersperse them throughout the conversation, but the first one is a very special one from bass Soloman Howard, who will sing two spirituals, first Going Home and then Swing Low. And after hearing which spiritual Soloman would sing, I decided to also put together a nice video tribute to three folks whom we all mourn: Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. These two pieces of art, Soloman's performance and the video, will play alongside each other. With that, here's Soloman Howard.
In loving memory of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. Going home, going home. Lord, I'm going home. Going home, going home. Lord, I'm going home. No more trials, no more cares, no more griefs to bear. All the faults we once knew, waiting over there. To the light we shall roam. All is peaceful there. Going home, going home. Lord, I'm going home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth, carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth, carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming forth, carry me home. chariot coming forth to carry me home.
Thank you, Soloman. What a beautiful tribute to all of those. And I would add now, unfortunately, Richard Brooks to that list. Up next, we have the featured presentation by Dr. Naomi André, a great friend of mine and someone whom I respect and admire so much. Dr. André is professor in women's studies, the Department of Afro-American and African Studies, and the associate director for faculty at the residential college at the University of Michigan. She received her BA in music from Barnard College and MA and PhD in musicology from Harvard University. Her research focuses on opera and issues surrounding gender, voice, and race. Her books, Black Opera, History, Power, Engagement, Blackness in Opera, and Voicing Gender, Castrati, Travesti, and the Second Woman in early 19th century Italian opera, explore constructions of race, gender, and identity. Her book, Black Opera, recently won the Lowens Book Award from the Society for American Music. Dr. Naomi André.
Thank you so much for this invitation, for all of you out there, and it is really a pleasure to be here to do something that feels really meaningful around these tough times. I want to center my talk on how we as people of color are seen in opera. And my long title here, Legacies Behind Seeing People of Color in Opera, or, and this really gets to what I mean, what I would like you to think about before seeing people of color in opera. I'm going to organize my time here in a few ways. Next slide. I'm going to start with a lens that goes back to the 1972 British BBC television series that soon afterwards, it was a television series, it became a book, and perhaps some of you are familiar with it, John Berger's Ways of Seeing. Then I'm going to talk about difficult historical issues here in the United States that still shape how Blackness specifically is seen, has been seen, and is currently seen up to the present. And then third, I'm going to suggest a few ways to move forward and pass these painful legacies that we've all inherited. In 1972, British writer John Berger presented a television series aired by the BBC, along with the documentary filmmaker Mike Dibbs, who was producing the show, and that was later adapted into a book. Both the TV series and the book were called Ways of Seeing. In its time, it opened up new ways for thinking about what we see and how it has meaning. Here in 2020, nearly 50 years later, there are things I find very helpful in Berger's constructions for thinking about how we interpret what we see. There are also things I think Berger doesn't address that I will get to in a couple of minutes. But let me open with explaining or refamiliarizing you with a couple of the key elements of Berger's Ways of Seeing that I believe are trenchant for helping us think about opera and representation. And thank you, this is the correct slide. Within the opening minutes of the first show in the series, Berger states, quote, The process of seeing paintings or seeing anything else is less spontaneous and natural than we tend to believe. A large part of seeing depends upon habit and convention, end quote. Wikipedia, and yes, that's such a helpful source. Wikipedia weaves these ideas together in their description of the TV series in the book by saying that the TV series in the book, quote, criticized traditional Western cultural aesthetics by raising questions about hidden ideologies in visual images. I like this quick overview analysis of Berger's work because it succinctly summarizes one of the revelations in art that Berger brought to the surface. First is the idea that aesthetics, and by that I'm referring to how we determine what is good and normalized in art, how aesthetics reflect something that is not universal or naturally contained within art. Aesthetics reveal hidden ideologies, or we might call them codes, for what we think is good and right. And I'll add that aesthetics also carry a connection to what is morally right and just for the community of viewers. Berger focuses most of his time on how art had depicted the female body, whether the nude in the art museum or the scantily clad woman in advertising. He talks about how women's bodies have been seen and consumed from the vantage point of the male gaze. Berger does not spend much time talking about seeing race and ethnicity. As a British man growing up after World War II, to bring these topics around race and ethnicity to the fore, his discussion would need to include the context of the changing British Empire in the first decades of post-colonialism and their renegotiated and tangled relationships as their former colonies moved towards independence. My desire here is to bring these ideas about seeing into how we see things within our own racialized context here in the United States. The Atlantic slave trade, which extended across the Americas to include Central and South America, had a specific articulation in the United States. A quick reference for a great overview of the latest ideas about this topic. Nicole Hannah-Jones has put together the 1619 project that was published last August in the New York Times. It does a terrific job about presenting slavery from a Black vantage point, a much needed vantage point. And thank you, slide 4. The Atlantic slave trade was different from other types of servitude and oppression. Unlike indentured servitude or other more common forms of what have been called slavery, such as in the ancient Roman Empire or in parts of the African continent, slavery in the colonies, which became the United States, evolved into a system that did not allow the slaves to work towards their freedom. Additionally, slavery in the United States cut off the primacy of kinship relationships between people. Hence, parents, children, relatives, and spouses were sold as economic transactions. The slaves were property and were not treated as fully human subjects. We have been carefully trained to see race, and specifically Blackness, which is what I'm going to be focusing on now, within a set of codes and aesthetics that have came out of a system of oppression. The Atlantic slave trade still haunts and shapes our vision today. Our primary ways of seeing are not spontaneous, as Berger mentioned 50 years ago. Instead, they are heavily reliant on habits and conventions that go way back to this institution of slavery. Next slide. I'm going to focus on two key elements of this legacy that were articulated in the 19th century and have been carried through to the present. And I'm sorry, some of these images are tough to see, and I just want to acknowledge that with minstrel faces. The practice of minstrelsy, as I'm talking about, and the influence of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin are central ingredients that have fueled what I'm going to call the American imagination and the construction of Blackness. Minstrelsy, along with Uncle Tom's Cabin, present two stealth ways that shaped ideologies around race in two seminal American art forms. Minstrelsy, just to emphasize the importance of these works, especially in the 19th century, minstrelsy has been called the first fully American musical tradition, even before jazz and the blues. This started earlier, as I'll talk about. The vast popularity of Uncle Tom's Cabin made it one of the most widespread books of the 19th century. In fact, it was translated into all major languages across the globe, but particularly in Europe. And in the United States, it became the second best-selling book after the Bible. Next slide. Minstrelsy, also called Ethiopian delineators and later Jim Crow, was a theatrical practice that emerged in the antebellum South in the late 1820s. However, it was a tradition that traveled internationally. It was a form of vaudeville theater that included white men blackening their faces with burnt cork and enacting a made-up form of behavior of Black people. Singing, dancing, and small theatrical skits were the breeding ground where specific stereotypes of Black people were created. Next slide. 4 leading minstrel stereotypes were the Sambo, the Buck, the Mammy, and the Jezebel. The happy-go-lucky slave who really didn't mind slavery became the Sambo. The hypersexualized Buck was the dangerous Black man who would rape all women, especially white women. The Mammy was the desexualized large Black woman who would take care of the master and his family. The Jezebel was the hypersexualized woman who was a great threat to white femininity by tempting white men in her so-called desire to be ravished in brutal, violent ways. Next slide. The abolitionist novel Uncle Tom's Cabin first appeared in 1851 as a serial story in the National Era, which was a weekly periodical based in Washington, D.C., and then it was published as a novel in 1852. Despite being written to expose the horrors of slavery, ironically, it helped solidify some of these stereotyped characterizations of Black people from minstrelsy, while also giving white people a way to interact differently with the institution of slavery. Reading this story could transform Black people from slaves who had violent tendencies into people who could be tamed and domesticated into a household staff. The title character, the uncle, was the long-suffering Black servant who will protect the master and his family at all costs. That novel also included the Mammy, a co-worker with the uncle, and the pickaninny, feral images of Black children who were depicted as wild, animal-like creatures incapable of proper speech, being clean or well-kempt. In Uncle Tom's Cabin, Black people were given more humanity, but were part of an inferior group of people who needed saving through Christianity and the charity of white people. This helped white people see Black folks in new, less threatening ways. Blacks were presented as people in dire situations who needed help. Within these circumstances, white people not only could see Black people as having the capacity for accepting religion, which fits into the ideology of a civilizing mission used by missionaries overseas contemporaneously in the 19th century, but this also so that they could see themselves relating to Black people in less violent ways than as cruel slaveholders. Whites could envision themselves as Christian abolitionists against the violence of slavery. Next slide. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel paved an insidious path for white people to feel good about relating to Blacks as inferior. Black people were never on equal footing with a capacity for intelligence and an agency of their own. This kinder view of Blacks made them definable and controllable. These two deeply American art forms, minstrelsy and Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, reveal how the American imagination in the 19th century was steeped in the image of Black people as either violent, who needed to be tamed, or as trainable creatures who could be domesticated. For the means of entertainment in vaudeville skits on the minstrel stage, or as the recipients of moral direction in literature, Black people were objects to be ridiculed or pitied. They were never seen as equal human beings who deserve the same respect, rights, and independence as white people. These are the difficult codes, embedded codes, for how Black people are still configured in the United States. This is a legacy we have all inherited and have been groomed to accept. This construction of Blackness has been the natural and conventional norm in American culture that we have all internalized. And by this, I mean Black and non-Black people. We have all been groomed to internalize this. Next slide. I want to conclude my talk without only this sobering discussion, but also to talk about two ways to counter this internalized American imagination around race. The first is the double consciousness that W.E.B. Du Bois theorized as a way to explain how Black folks are able to survive. The double consciousness allows Blacks to understand their position in the white world and realize the need to create a very different self-perception in their own minds and communities. Having this double consciousness is the key. It's a key, and I think a very important one, to survival for Black folks, and it's helpful for white folks to realize that there is another, more accurate vision of Blackness out there. The second point I want to make in closing is from Lonnie Guinier and Gerald Torres's book from 2003, The Miner's Canary, Enlisting Race, Resisting Power, Transforming Democracy. The canary in the minefield is meant to reveal when the air has become toxic for everyone. We do not need to make a teeny little gas mask for the canary. Instead, we need to fix the toxic environment. We can think about race as a metaphor for the vulnerability of the miner's canary, fixing the systemic racial barriers around education, housing, and health will benefit everyone, not just Black people. So I close with these two ideas. W.B. Du Bois's construction of the double consciousness can be used for all people to understand that we need to seek the alternative, more accurate realities of who Black people really are. And second, Guinier and Torres' paradigm of the miner's canary provides a way for us to create a better democracy for all people, Black folks along with everyone else. Thank you very much.
Gather up, gather
Fantastic performance. That was Julia Bullock and Christiane Reif singing Litany of John Musto with text by Langston Hughes. Also, thank you, Dr. André, for your fabulous presentation. I think we all learned something from that, and I think it's a great centering piece for our panel discussion, which we'll get to in just a second. First, I want to introduce the panelists, and I will go through and introduce everyone in alphabetical order. So I'll do that now, and I probably will disappear because I'm going to be reading from my computer, but their pictures should be alongside mine. Baritone Brandon Bell is from Suffolk, Virginia. He's currently a resident artist at Utah Opera and has performed as a young artist at Des Moines Metro Opera, Chautauqua Opera, Wolf Trap Opera Studio, and the Brevard Music Center. Prominent roles include Colline in La Bohème, Leporello and Mazzetto in Don Giovanni, and Dottore Bartolo in Le Nozze di Figaro. He holds degrees from University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and San Francisco Conservatory of Music. Soprano Julia Bullock is from St. Louis, Missouri, my hometown as well, where she participated in Opera Theater of St. Louis's Artist in Training Program for promising high school classical singers, graduating with their prestigious Merrill Huber Award. And I didn't know until I was putting together this biography that I and Julia shared that honor. We both did that program and both received the same award. So she and I will have a lot to talk about at some later date. Julia serves as the 2019 and 2020 Artist in Residence of the San Francisco Symphony. She has held a similar position last season at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and is a founding member of the American Modern Opera Company. Prominent roles include Anne True-Love in The Rake's Progress, the title roles in The Indian Queen and Cendrillon, Susanna in Le Nozze di Figaro, and Pamina in Die Zauberflöte. Bullock is also committed to integrating community activism with her musical life. She holds degrees from the Eastman School of Music, Bard College, and the Juilliard School. Baritone Kenneth Overton is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Widely known for his concert work, he has performed with Phoenix Symphony, Norwalk Symphony, National Chorale, Harlem Chamber Players, Lexington Philharmonic, San Antonio Symphony, and many others. Prominent roles include Jake Wallace in La Fanciulla del West, the title role in Porgy and Bess, Germont in La Traviata, Michele in Il Tabarro, Papageno in Die Zauberflöte, and Marcello in La Bohème. His debut solo album, Been in the Storm So Long, Songs My Fathers Taught Me, is an homage to the spiritual tradition that has been formative in his artistic life. He serves as the co-founder and artistic director of Opera Noire, a performing arts organization based in New York City, created to empower African-American artists to reach their full creative potential in a creative and supportive environment. Soprano Eileen Pérez is from Chicago, Illinois. In demand at the world's leading opera houses and cultural capitals, she is a recipient of the Richard Tucker Award and is the first Hispanic recipient in the award's 35-year history. That's a comment. And awards from the Operalia competition, the Lauren L. Zachary Foundation, Opera Index, and Albanese Puccini Foundation. Prominent roles include the title role in Massenet's Manon, Mimi and Musetta in La Bohème, Juliette in Romeo et Juliette, and Adina in L'Elisir d'Amore. She holds degrees from Indiana University and the Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia. Soprano Karen Slack is hailed for her lustrous voice of extraordinary beauty. She has performed with major conductors in opera houses and concert halls around the world. At age 18, she was the youngest winner in the history of the Rosa Poncel International Competition for the Vocal Arts and has received the Marian Anderson Acon Award. She has also received awards from the George London Foundation, the Albanese Puccini Foundation, Liederkranz Foundation, and the Metropolitan Opera National Council. Prominent roles include Sister Rose in Dead Men Walking, Anna in Le Villi, Serena in Porgy and Bess, and Imelda in Terence Blanchard's Champion. Tenor Andrew Stenson is quickly building a reputation as one of the United States' most exciting young tenors. He is the first prize winner of the Giulio Gotti International Vocal Competition and the Gerd Lissner Foundation Competition. Prominent roles include the steersman in Der Fliegende Holländer, Tamino in Die Zauberflöte, the title role in Candide, and Danny Chin in American Soldier. He holds degrees from Luther College and the Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. These are panelists. Now we will move to a performance by John Holiday and Kevin Miller singing Dream Variation by Margaret Bonds, again with poetry by Langston Hughes. Absolutely gorgeous. Well, here we are, friends. The panel discussion is so lovely to see all of you. You know, the first thing I want to say is that I appreciate the emotional labor that discussions like this take. I can tell you and be the first one that it's not easy, and it really takes a lot of strength and focus, and often requires recuperation after the fact. So I acknowledge that, and I am so grateful for you all for joining us for this conversation, which is just so important in the climate both of our country and of our industry right now. So Dr. André, your presentation was so moving, mostly because those ideas and the subject matter are ones that we know, those of us who have studied African American history and have some general understanding, but it's not often that we combine those ideas with the arts. And I think that's something that is so important, and something I want us to unpack during this discussion. The first thing I want to do, though, is to go around and get a preliminary question answered from everyone. And I am, being my usual dramatic self, is going to be a very deep question. And I've talked to all of you about this question. And if there's answer it how you want to answer it, if you want to pass, that's absolutely fine. But I think it's important that these kinds of questions are unpacked. So here's the question. Identify a moment in your career that revealed to you that your race is the defining feature of how you're viewed in the industry. How did you adapt your actions or adjust your goals to this discovery? I'm going to read that one more time. Identify a moment in your career that revealed to you that your race is a defining feature of how you are viewed in the industry. How did you adapt your actions and adjust your goals? Why don't we start with you, Karen?
Well, when I started my career, singing Mozart and early Verdi. And I was singing at the San Francisco Opera. I had just finished the program maybe 2 years before. I was singing Tchaikovsky with Dolores Ajak, singing Maid of Orleans. And I was approached by the then new general director, to sing Serena and their Porgy and Bess upcoming. And I turned it down twice, and then I figured, oh shoot, I can't turn it down again if it comes up. And because I would probably never work there again, and I accepted. But after that success, I started getting more offers to sing Serena. And when my voice started to grow and change and darken and get fuller, that is what came up after that success. They just started coming in. And then I realized, oh, I am now a Black soprano, which I never thought about. My color, my race, going through school, going through my education, I just never thought about that. I made a decision to be the best Serena that I could be, one of the best in the world, which happened. And
Certainly did.
a thing, right? And I said that. I said, if this is what they're gonna do, this is what they're gonna give me, I'm gonna be undeniable in it, and everything else that I do. But yeah, that for me, that was a transformative moment after having so much early success, and then all of a sudden getting stuffed in a box.
Yeah. And I think that's especially powerful since, it was not just once, but several times. And so it's like someone had constructed an idea of who they wanted you to be, and they were going to get you into that box no matter what you wanted, So thank you for sharing that, Karen. How about you? Let's go to Eileen, Pérez, and Soloman Howard, who was not originally scheduled for the panel. We enjoy your performance, but we're so happy to have you. So please add whenever you want.
Well, even just hearing Karen answer, I mean, the emotional reaction it causes is huge, because you go to music to find your place in an unlabeled kind of way. And then you get to the business and postgraduate studies, and then you see the labels come right back. And so it's heartbreaking that, in a way, I mean, in one sense, Karen, you slay, right? And that's, you always do. But I want to hear you at every role, every piece of music by every composer, because your voice and your soul is trained for that. We're trained to, what you may not know, and as an opera singer, is that, and as a woman, we are oftentimes dealing with archetypes. So the second woman is already, so how we had that presentation by Dr. André, we see that in the archetypes of the operas that we often sing, and Mozart being one of the fundamental ones, and we see it in Strauss, we see it all over the place, politically, ethnically, and, you know, about gender. So, with that said, it is, I think the first impact was, okay, I'm Latina, and also my height, and then aptitude for language, and my ability to just to be in my own skin, you know, my love for drama and my abandon for the spiritual, and it matched with opera, but it had to at some point be aligned to someone else. So as an American opera singer, you often get put into comparison directly, immediately, no chance for your own voice to be you. You are going to be the next De Los Angeles, the next Leontyne Price, the next whoever empowered the recording artists that we know and recognize by name and face and sound. That's who then encapsulates like how we can and cannot move within the industry. And that is something that also needs to break apart, because we should have leaders, I mean, you didn't ask me yet, but we should have leaders that understand a trajectory of, you know, as much of the experience as we have in training there should be a multicultural understanding, a long-term range for each artist in their development, nationality, ethnic background, all of it, because education was supposed to be the equalizer. It was supposed to be the answer. And I have to answer young students who want to sing Strauss that look like me and say, yeah, it's going to be possible. Okay. And you got to find your friends, and you've got to work on it, because if you wait on the industry to set it up for you, you might be waiting a while. And it happened not just to our generation. This is an age-old story. So, you know, thank you.
What about you, Solomon? Was there a point in your career you can remember, like, oh, I'm seen as not a bass, but a black bass?
Well, I believe that every time I enter the room and you know, I start to speak, it's already, you know, you don't remind me of, oh, the other great basses. It's specifically Simon Estes, Paul Robeson. I get Paul Robeson all the time. And I'm honored, because, I mean, they're part of the reason why I'm able to be here, Derrell, why you're able to be here, Kenneth, Karen, like why we're able to be here as African-American performers, because of the work that they put in before us. But then I go in, I sing rep, and a German chorister says to me, oh, do you sing Old Man River? And I'm like, okay. Well, you know, I just finished, like, in the Karen Slack form, I finished slaying, like, whatever it was that I was there to sing. As Kenneth Overton says, I clocked in early.
Yes.
I clocked in early for that day, and I was ready. And it's always, well, that was beautiful, but I bet you sure sing a great Old Man River. And I'm always brought back to, you know, spirituals, Old Man River, gospel. Nothing that I'm ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of it at all.
Right.
But no matter where I go, they remind me that Old Man River, in a way, is what they really want to hear me sing. And you know.
And so similar to Karen, then, you know, it's like, no matter what you're singing, if it's Brahms, if it's Verdi, you know, if someone has a box in their mind as they're listening to you, very similar to, you know, these kinds of predispositions people have, you know, as according to Dr. André's presentation, they're going to figure out a way to put you in that box. So as you're singing, they're already thinking about your tone, already thinking about Paul Robeson, already thinking about the last time they heard Old Man River. And it's something that really, really has to be dismantled if we're going to move forward.
And if we're not, really quickly, if we're not careful, it makes us resent that music. It makes us resent, you know, those arts, if we're not careful. Like, fortunately, I was raised by great parents. I was raised in the church. And I understand my purpose, but if I did not understand my purpose, I would resent the self-hatred that I could potentially have by someone suggesting something that, you know, my ancestors in this business did, it could make me hate that part of me. But I was not raised like that, and I understand that I have a greater calling.
Yeah. And that resentment is so real. It's just like the J. Saunders Redding author I mentioned earlier. Folks like him, and even someone like Ralph Waldo Ellison, who wrote The Invisible Man, both of those are Black artists who were very prominent, but spoke vocally about how they did not want to be Black authors. They wanted to be authors. They didn't want, they were not interested in the politics of what Black people were trying to do in society. And I don't think that was out of a desire to dismiss Black people. I think it has because they had become so exhausted, as you say, Soloman, with constantly being put back in the same political box of furthering the Black experience. What about you, Brandon, as the youngest person on the panel, someone still in the young artist circuit? What was a defining moment in your career?
I think for me, that realization really came through my education, through my undergrad. I think that was one of the moments in which I realized that people saw me not just as a singer, but as a Black singer. I talk a lot about an experience I had being in the chorus of a show, which as an undergrad at a conservatory is like a huge deal to be in a chorus. And so we were doing Pasquale, right? And so in the chorus, like, we're all servants. And I remember everyone was in the chorus, was in tuxes and these beautiful dresses and gowns, except for me. I was the gardener servant, right? And as like I wish now that I had the foresight that I had back then, because when I was in the undergrad, it didn't click. But I remember being in that first production meeting that first day, and then passing around our looks for our characters and seeing the beautiful dresses, and then and this is the gardener look, and being passed around. And I get the piece of paper and I'm like, I think they literally Googled slave, put it on the paper, and passed it around. And I think that was for me a moment in which I realized that I had to do more than just be a good singer. I had to think more than just about my singing. And I had to think about how I was going to allow myself to be presented on stage.
Yeah.
Because at that moment, I was very, very grateful for the opportunity to get to sing on the stage. But looking back at those pictures now, when I see them, I'm like, I can't believe I let myself, do that, because that's not the way that I want to be seen on stage anymore, or ever. And so I think it's like an extra piece of work that I have to do. And so you asked about how like I had to change my actions. I think I realized that I have to look out for myself in that way now. And I have to be very conscious in the choices that I make and the things that I do and what I want to say yes to, so that I know that I'm not just representing myself, but I'm representing Black men on stage, Black people on stage. And I have to be conscious in a way that I think a lot of other people, a lot of my white colleagues don't have to be.
Right. And what's so tragic about that, and this is something I'm kind of putting together in my head as you're speaking, is on Solomon's point that when we do all of this work to make sure that we're not put into these boxes and start to internalize a sense of resentment, not only does it create that resentment, but it also potentially creates this sense of disdain toward those who are doing that work, those who are willing to be in the chorus wearing slave garb, or those who are, I remember this big production of Porgy and Bess at the Met, and a lot of friends of mine, some people I didn't know, but were posting, I'm making my Met debut. And here I am as someone with, maybe a slightly more sophisticated understanding of the industry, knowing that a lot of those folks won't be hired back at the Met, just feeling pity for them. And then I started to check myself, just like, they don't need you to feel pity for them. Like, if they're excited about that and they're having fun, like, that's awesome, so it creates this ambivalence within us. And it's an ambivalence that we have not constructed ourselves at the industry, and its insistence on these racist boxes creates, not only within the larger artistic makeup, but also within specific groups. I'm sure Eileen can say the same thing for Hispanic and her experience, and Andrew can probably say the same thing for some of his experiences coming from an Asian point of view. Dr. André, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to jump in really quickly because I was, as far as I know, the first Black woman to get a PhD from the Harvard Music Department. And I wrote a dissertation. Oh, thank you. Yeah, there haven't been many after me. Unfortunately, a couple. But I wrote a dissertation on Verdi, Giuseppe Verdi, and I tried to get that published, get articles, get things out. Nobody would let me be in opera studies officially. Nobody would invite me to be on panels. Nobody would publish my stuff. I was once asked to be on an NEH grant because they needed to show that they invited a person of color. But I wasn't then invited to be on, it was in 2001, I was a fairly new PhD, and it was the centennial of Verdi's death from 1901. Wasn't asked. So what did I do? I said, okay, I'm going to answer my own questions about representation and race, which as a scholar, and I've been at my job for 25 years, I mean, a long time, and finally it's happening. But I just wanted to, opera is like that. You guys with your bodies on stage, there's a huge thing you're going through. I want to be your ally and sort of write about this and get you in roles. Karen, I want to hear you sing in Verdi. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. André. Andrew, what about you? Is there a defining moment you can think about? Before you actually answer, Andrew, I want to let those watching know that we will be taking questions from the live chat. And so if you have any questions that align with the discussion, or any questions that, knowing the makeup of the panel, you think would be pertinent to the discussion, please write those in the chat, and we have some LBO folks in there peeping them out, and they're going to give them to me. But you have a deadline. Your deadline is 5:15. So that's a hard deadline. So get the questions in there. And if you have questions after 5:15, they're going to live in your soul for a while, because we won't be able to get to them. Okay. So Andrew.
It's interesting hearing what everyone's talking about with like getting compartmentalized, and the industry wants to create a convenient little box of this is what you are, and that normally leads to comparison of singers in the past. That also makes a conundrum for Asian people, because we don't have many or any illustrious singers in the past. The two people I can think of who have had the longest careers off the top of my head are Hae Kyung-hung and Sumi Jo, and that's all that I can think of. And so the industry has had a bit of a conundrum with me, because they don't have anyone to immediately compare me to. That being said, I'm sure all of my colleagues here actually can agree that race has always been a defining feature of who you are in America. And so I took that into work myself immediately and tried to remain cognizant of that, because I just think there's no separation from that, especially when a lot of the people that are hiring you are white. So yeah, you start getting careful about what you're taking. I started this career wanting to just be a character tenor, and it was like, oh man, I'm Asian, I can be a character tenor, I can sing 1,000,000 goros and get rich, this will be awesome. But fortunately for me, a lot of people in the industry pushed me. They heard more like leading lyric tenor in my singing. And I was very, very fortunate to have a lot of advocates really pushing me for that. That being said, maybe like, you know, it was only possible if it was somebody else's idea and not my own, and had been given the seal of approval by somebody of influence who was probably, you know, at that time, a white gatekeeper. But that ended up evolving into what my career was going to be. But that being said, like, I always tried to keep it in the back of my mind. The moment you start taking, you know, ping pang pong or goro, that's it.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. I mean, of course, that aligns a lot of us who had really good mentors when we were younger in career. Brandon, you may know this, is that a lot of times we're in conservatory in our first years, and they're like, if you're early in career, don't say no, accept everything. And the Black people in the class were like, yeah, we're not, like, I'm not accepting Porgy. Like, my mentor told me not to accept Porgy and Bess until I did, and so we have to have a different strategy. And that's something that I really want people to understand, that even in our education, the very beginning of becoming a classical artist, the strategy has to be slightly altered in order to become successful. Thank you, Andrew. What about you, Julia?
Really quickly,
to
your point with mentors, it reminds me of our conversation growing up. You get pulled over by the police. This is what you do as a Black man in America. You put your hands on the dash, or just the instructions of how we are to act, how we are to be obedient, how we are to be polite. We don't necessarily have the same, same leeway.
Freedom.
That same freedom to say, no, why are you pulling me? This is unjustified, the reason that you're pulling me over. I've been profiled several times to be pulled over because the tag light around my license plate is out, and I'm like, well, I literally just came from the mechanic, or I literally just changed the bulb myself, so I know it's working. So your reason is unjustified. But then, you go into that. So I just wanted to reiterate the fact that, our conversations are different. It's not, well, speak up for yourself. It's, whenever it's be careful, behave, be polite, be obedient.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Thanks, Soloman. Julia?
I very similarly to everyone else who has spoken here, from when I first started studying music and singing, I was compared to Audra McDonald, Kathleen Battle, Shirley Verrett, Marian Anderson, Leontine Price. Just the lists go on and on.
And some of those voices are wholly different than yours.
They're very different than mine. But we are in a culture, as you were saying, Andrew, we are part of a society where the idea of race, or categorization at least, is, and identifying people through categorization is really important. And it's because this concept of race and the delusion of it, because it's not based in anything biological, it's a part of feeding into this, into white supremacy. So I, because of my mixed heritage, I had to actually unsubscribe to the idea of defining myself by a race early on. And I started that process really actively in high school. But I'm really grateful to classical music in a way, not in a way, I'm very grateful to classical music because it was through classical music, through my teachers making these comparisons also. Josephine Baker, I'll add her to the list, that I had to start reconciling not my issue about being identified by my race, but I actually had to start working on defining my identity more clearly, and starting to really own my culture, and a culture maybe that I had tried to abandon for a period of time because I did not want to be considered a Black soprano. I was so worried about that. I was also very concerned about how I was going to be perceived on stage. I was terrified of even walking into a proscenium, and it's okay, I have to be the greatest representative of all Black life in existence. I have to be the most noble, the most dignified. The pressure that I put on myself to uphold that, and also I had legitimate fury when I looked at performers who I thought were up there not conscious of that. And it's looking back on it now, all of this, again, it's just feeding into this convincing oneself of what we have to do and who we need to be because of something that is again, we're just indoctrinated with this idea of our
Absolutely.
differentiation between our races. So, but I then started programming around it specifically and very pointedly started programming around it because I didn't know
Yeah.
any other way to deal with it. I didn't know how else to reconcile it, and so that's
Yeah.
how I started to cope with it.
Sure.
And then it got
and
labeled
that's so
not as just
common.
it is, and then it got labeled not as just a soprano of color, black soprano, but an activist soprano.
Yeah. I know
Um,
that label well.
Yeah. Which, hey, okay, I understand that I activate every single space that I enter into as a
Yeah.
performer.
Yeah.
I get that.
Great.
But that's also
That you have
another
to.
pressure.
It's also problematic. Absolutely. Thanks, Julia. Kenny?
So yeah, mine sort of came in waves, and I'll harken back to something that I learned from Oprah, who I adore. She said that we all have like this gift of discernment, and she likened it to the pebble. And she said, if the pebble hits you in the back of your head, you can sort of explain it away or ignore it. And then the next one comes and it's a rock. And you can sort of explain that away. And then the next one's a brick. And you might be able to find an excuse for that. Then it's a boulder. And you're really knocked over the head with it. And so I harken back to my early days in high school with Karen. We were like, as well prepared as it made us for the world of the arts, it also sort of gave us a false representation because there was every color in the world in our high school, and we all did everything. We were all presented. We were all showcased. We were all educated and featured and taken care of. And so then when I got to college or into my first young artist program, which was run by a Black woman, the only Black woman ever in America to be the general director of an opera company at Chautauqua, was Linda
Whoa.
Jackson. And
Linda.
Linda Jackson took me into Chautauqua, and I walked in the door, and I was the only Black person in the program. And it wasn't until many, 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 many years later, more than a decade later, she and Willie Waters pulled me to the side and said, hey, listen, just because we were in charge, we had boundaries placed on us by our boards. Don't turn this into an all black company just because you're Black. Don't bring all these Black singers in here. One or two a season, that's enough. And so they had that pressure. And so I felt then really pressured being the one or the two allowed into the room, into the season. And then came school when, I had a teacher fight me and say, you cannot sing a spiritual as a selection for your jury. And what I did was that I went to my teacher, who was not Black, and we marched to the dean's office and we said, listen, a spiritual was on my list to get into this school that gave me a full scholarship. Why can I not sing another one as a jury requirement? And we won.
Good.
And then I'm thrust into the industry. I'm working. And every mentor in the world says, make sure you stay away from Porgy. Make sure you stay away from Porgy. So I'm doing Carmen. I'm doing Bohème. I'm doing Traviata. I'm doing flute. I'm doing all these. And then 10 years into the career, Porgy comes. And I said, well, I'm established enough to take it. I want to take it. It's a badge of honor. And I still think that it is. And then I started doing it. And then it's like, come do Porgy in Mexico. Okay. Come do Porgy in Canada. Okay. Come sing Porgy in Berlin. Okay. Come sing Porgy in Ireland. Okay. Come sing Porgy, in South America. Okay. All these places, and the bank account is growing and growing. And then that's when the boulder comes. And the boulder was like, whoa.
This is who you are.
All these calls. So this is what you really think of me. And so how I handled it was I got on the phone, I called my agent, and I said, after this 103rd performance of Porgy, we are done. And if I'm a viable artist, I'll survive without it. And 4 years into it to today, I've not had to do it, and I'm surviving great. But that's the Overton way. I look at the problem, and I see an obstacle, and my goal is to knock it down. My goal is to say, this is not acceptable for me, and whoever else I have to bring on my back, let's go. That's how I roll. And so I created my company for Black singers out of sheer necessity. That's how I answered it. That's how I answer it.
Great. Yeah, I mean, this darn porgy, it's just like you like hate it or you love it, or you are a little bit of both. And it's usually a little bit of both for all of us, because it's, of course, gorgeous music. But the harm, in my opinion, and this is an informed opinion and a very thoughtful opinion, the harm that it has done on the Black operatic community is so vast because of these boxes that you're talking about, Kenny. You know, it's these companies, you know, because they know when they do porgy, they're going to make all of this money and sell all these tickets. And so a lot of times, when they see Black people, they're seeing dollar signs for their porgy production in 2 years, you know, and that's a problem. Dr. André, I want to come back to this idea of double consciousness, because for me, it is the clarifying understanding of the Black American experience. And I just want us to maybe wrap it into the opera world a little bit more. And so first, I want to just talk about what that is, that 1903 text from W.E.B. Du Bois. And I'll recite it now just so we're all familiar. It says, after the Egyptian and Indian, the Greek and Roman, the Teuton and Mongolian, the Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with a veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the eyes of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals, and one dark body whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. So how does that powerful text fit into our discussion on opera?
So much for looking it up. I was trying so hard to keep everything short, and so I used the double consciousness kind of to my own means. You've read the text, thank you, because it basically, what he's saying is we need to realize that Black folks have the way the world sees them and the way that, you know, which isn't the real which isn't the real truth. I wanted to twist it around and say we can all use this double consciousness to realize that this legacy of stereotypes is the one way that Black folks are seen. And we as Black folks have internalized this because we have to, because this is what's out there. And then we realize, wait a minute, this isn't true. What I hope that we can have in opera is to say, wait a minute, the fact that Black people shouldn't be in opera because all the characters are European is not the truth for the United States. And it's not even the truth for Europe and other parts of the world anymore, after colonialism, after globalization, after all of these things. And a really interesting theme I'm looking at, and I would be interested if people are to email me about it or talk about it here, is what do we do with sort of true to color casting and then so-called blind, colorblind casting?
Yeah.
In the United States, and I think, and I think all over the world, nobody cannot not see color. Now, there's certain operas that have characters that are ethnically and racially and nationally distinguished. You know, what is Aida or Othello or Madama Butterfly, or even including West Side Story, where the race, ethnicity, sort of that matters to the story. Who gets to sing which roles? What is at stake? And I feel in opera, because we've got that you guys are doing this incredible work of having to have the right voice. Not everybody can sing everything. So having the right voice and temperament and sound to the voice, finding the right voice. We need to be a little colorblind or have courageous casting, but it's a very complicated issue in opera, and I think we need to address it.
Absolutely. Andrew, you wanted to say something on that?
Yes, to go along exactly with that. Something that I was really inspired by during the LA Opera Talk that Julia was a part of with many more of our colleagues. There was this big call for using the arts for social justice, that the arts are so much more than just like pretty music or entertaining stories, that this is a great medium to pursue social justice. And that's something that I think opera is such a strength for it, because these are timeless stories. Now, that being said, I think a lot of these stories are getting actually quite tired. And the addition of people of color to these roles that have typically been white, let's say, does oodles of storytelling by just having a person be. When we did Candida Glimmerglass, I know a big part of my casting was that I look the way that I do. And you say a lot from the moment I turn around and you see this short yellow kid amongst a bunch of white people that look like they can be musical theater. You immediately set your scene. You don't need to spend 15 minutes creating the world that you're in. The fact that this person looks different compared to these people tells you tons of story, and you just get to hit the ground running. And I think that is a really underused storytelling device that can give so many people who need representation, more representation in our industry.
I love
Absolutely.
how you just mentioned that it's, thank you for making what I said even more sort of sophisticated, because we see color and then we can see you can have this sort of courageous element where somebody's race will say other things about the character that are really interesting and add to the story, don't diminish from it at all. So, and this is our reality today when we see things in the United States in most of the places, and particularly with younger people, like, whoa, where's the diversity? I'm a little uncomfortable. It's all white. I love hearing that. So having that mix on stage, I think says a lot.
Great. Julia, do you have any thoughts around this double conscious idea? Thinking about it from your point of view, I just feel like there may be some conflict there, because if someone sees you and just sees a Black woman and attaches everything that they think about Black women upon you, that's not, I mean, it's problematic for anybody, you know, but for you, that's not even 100% accurate given your mixed heritage. So does that ever go into your thing? I'm sure it does, but maybe how?
Yeah, I honestly, I need to think a little bit more about this double consciousness idea, truthfully, but I know, at least when those comparisons have been made, even in the press, I have written to the critic who wrote a review or whatever, just to let them know actually what my heritage is and how I define myself, and no expectation for it needing to be changed or anything like that. But yeah, but in terms of the double consciousness thing, I'm just going to think on that a little.
Yeah, we all do. And it's funny, Dr. André, you said that I looked it up and read it. I wasn't reading it. That was from memory, because that idea is so ingrained within me that every single, you know, I do these presentations around Blacktivism. Thank you. I do these presentations around Blacktivism, and it's the main feature I often tell audiences: if you don't understand anything else that I'm saying, try to absorb this idea of Du Bois's double consciousness, because it will tell you miles about the Black experience that can help you determine where your inconsistencies are, where your holes are in your understanding of race politics in America. I want to start weaving in some questions from the live chat. I'll throw the first one to Karen and then Kenny, both of whom I know do a lot of work and activism for getting more Black people specifically and people of color more generally into positions of administration. So this comes from Elizabeth Rosenberg Ray. She says, as artists become more courageous and begin to tell their own experiences with racism in the opera industry, what is the best way for administrators to handle this information if these testimonials implicate someone the company has employed?
Say that again.
So she's saying that as people become more courageous and tell their experiences with racism,
Yes.
and more people learn about what people have experienced, if a company finds out that someone they employ has been, you know, the aggressor in one of those racist encounters, what are some of the options that those administrators should have in terms of how to deal with those situations?
Get rid of them.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Kenny?
I sort of feel the same way. I mean, we just sort of passed a tumultuous time in the operatic version of the Me Too movement, and we saw a barrage of firings happening of very, very powerful men, of very, very powerful conductors or agents or singers or whatever. And oftentimes, most often than not, these firings were based upon stories of anonymity. If we have stories where there is no anonymity and the people who have experienced the racism or the offense have come forward with receipts, then similar action should take place.
I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I mean, listen, there have been many people in this industry who've had their jobs for a very long time. And the conversations that people have in administration with one another, sometimes you're privy to and sometimes you're not, but you do know that these conversations are happening. If I come to you and I say, this thing happened to me, someone says something racist to me in a coaching, in a rehearsal, it made me feel a certain way, I guarantee you I'm not the first person that has come and said something, if enough people have come together. If an administrator has to question whether or not they should get rid of someone in their company that spews negativity, either sexuality, racism, you know what I mean? Like, that's not even a
Absolutely.
question. At this point, we need to get rid of these people.
Yeah. So
Yes,
I'm going to maybe complicate the question a little bit because I want to bring in a lot of you on the panel and watching may have seen the recent Facebook post of Tanya Ratwa Tawengwa, one of our colleagues, who details a pretty troubling experience she had at one of the major young artist programs. So I want to just include some of her thoughts, and I've talked to her about this and she's given me permission to share some of her thoughts and see if we can unpack a little bit, because I absolutely agree with Karen and Kenny that if someone has been explicitly racist toward you and someone brings that to you, and it takes all the courage the same way that you would if someone detailed a sexual encounter with someone that was unwanted and forced, you would get rid of them. The same would need to be true if it dealt with race. Tanya's experience, I guess we can talk about whether it is at that level or if there's a complication there. So I just want to include some of her thoughts. I'm going to screen share some of these thoughts. So this is the beautiful young woman. And I think it was yesterday that she talks about a young white woman who was also a young artist in the program touching her hair and then her sitting down with her and telling her, I don't like that. And she says, the last thing I expected was to deal with a racist housemate in an opera program touting a diverse community of artists. I took a day to heal myself from the violence of a white woman touching hair that is sacred to me. I'm not sure if you guys can see the highlighting that I've done, but the green represents kind of Tanya's own inward thinking, and then the yellow represents what she has to exhibit out to the outside world. And then she says, and then I set her down and I did my best to teach her, though this should have been the job of company diversity training that was non-existent. And I absolutely agree with Tanya about the impropriety of touching a Black person's hair. She laughed and said, I guess you have to tell that to a lot of people. So at that point, she then goes and she talks to our meeting, the YAP director, who's a white man, asked who the housemaid was. I told him, and he known her for 4 years. She wouldn't say that. And then he added, some people don't get the hair thing and that she probably didn't mean it. So I should let it go and deal with it. This meeting left me distraught. I cried inconsolably in my car because of the violence of being gaslighted, discounted, and silenced by a white man in a position of authority. And what I want to add to this is that this morning I actually had a conversation with this YAP director, just to let him know that I was going to be sharing these comments and to see if he had any part of his perspective that he wanted to share. And one thing he did tell me was that, as with any situation like this, the details are slightly different than what he remembers, but he says that he absolutely stands with her and he believes her, and that he's trying to attach himself to the work. And so I guess the complication to the question I want to ask is that in a situation like this, is the move for someone who's saying they want to do the work, is the move to allow that person to do the work, because when they come out on the other side of doing the work, assuming they do it in earnest, they're going to be an ally and someone who really is going to be able to make more sophisticated decisions in these sorts of matters? Or is the option to get rid of this person and just hope that the next person will be more quote unquote woke? That's the complication. And in a time where we don't have Black and people of color rushing into these positions of administration for a slew of reasons, mostly because of systemic racism, I don't know if we could magically expect that the next person would be someone of color. So if the next person is white, do we set ourselves backwards by not allowing this person with the spotlight on him to maybe grow from this experience? What do you think about that, Brandon, as a young artist?
That is an incredible question. I mean, I think to start off, it's amazing that, because I think as young artists, we often don't have the agency to address these types of things. I could call up any of my Black friends that have been in any of these young artist programs, and we all have stories that are similar to what this young woman has experienced. And for most of us, we feel like we don't have the opportunity to speak up, whether it's because of fear of retaliation. We're told as young artists that we are easily replaceable. And so this idea of rocking the boat, if you rock once, you might not ever be let back in. And so I think I'm just very proud that she found the strength and the ability to.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah.
But to answer your question, I that's very difficult, because I think, right now we're finding that, and this is really hard for me, because it seems, a lot of these issues we've been talking about for years, and it seems like white people are still coming to these realizations today. And so it's a part of me is very tired of giving space and giving you time, because I have had this realization years ago. You've had time to catch up. And so a part of me is very tired of allowing people time to catch up to what they should have gotten by now. But a part of me also, I think part of my nature is to give people grace and time to grow and develop. And so I don't know if I can pick one or the other. And
that's
hard.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. Eileen or Soloman, do you guys maybe have a comment on that?
Back to Brandon's point, we're taught to give grace and be forgiving. At a certain point, you ask, or someone has to say, how much do you expect me to take? and to keep saying, "Oh, I forgive you. I know you didn't mean it that way," because sometimes I do realize that people will say what they really mean and then hide behind an apology. You know, "Oh, well, you know, it's not what I really meant." I mean, I've been asked, "Oh, can I touch your hair?" And my response is, "It's not a petting zoo. I'm not here as an animal or here as a, you know, something on the shelf that you walk by and touch, or you know, I'm not the log at Apollo Theater. You rub me for good luck, and then you walk out, and then we have a great show together." So, you know, my inclination is, or my instinct is to respond, like, and we try not to let certain parts of our background come out to the forefront, but my initial reaction is to respond and let you know that it's not okay. And then if if things persist after that, then I deal with it. But you know, you had several things to say.
Oh, I'm shaking with fury. It's enraging because we don't have the same choice, right? I cannot even stand most of the time and say to a person in authority who should know better not to speak to me in a condescending tone, even though I am younger, even though she has overseen many talents in the business for probably 40 years, maybe 30, but I'm thinking probably 40. So it's really tough that on our side of the table, we still are witnessing a time where, whether it's human resources, whether it's the code of conduct packet, welcome packet that you get upon arrival for many of the American companies, possibly European companies, although I haven't experienced it enough to know that you really get a definition of behavior that's appropriate and behavior that's not. And that's a fundamental issue that, again, you know, as we're seeing the police officers, this horrifying scene that we're seeing in the current events, you know, they are also not equipped to understand the social worker standpoint of how to even approach the people and to be in service of that community to begin. I mean, it's a different job. So absolutely. I find that not only is this young lady a recipient of some horrifying behavior, but you also have an administration which is not being responsible and active, preventative, to one, vet the person in any position to have the experience that we're required to have in terms of multicultural, you know, I can't sing at the Met until I'm singing this role all over the world. You know, I mean, it's very rare an occasion that someone gets a very, you know, a prominent debut in a prominent house with zero experience. It's very rare. I've never seen it in my lifetime. And if it was, I don't know if it was a person from an ethnic background. So I think that that's why this is so hard to answer. Because we're not coming to terms, we're not defining as companies, we're not holding our leaders. We don't, even as an established artist, oh, sorry, I need to calm down. Even as an established artist, we are, there is scarcity and disparity to, again, you mentioned as a young artist, I'm sorry to tell you that this feeling does not go away even with 10 years, and as I know colleagues who've been singing for over 20 years. The replacement and the subjectivity and the fact that I cannot prove that how I look, whether I gain weight, lose weight, change, whatever it is, whatever role, I can't prove it to you. It's not an athletic performance that I can say, I am hired as a quarterback and I got this multi-million-dollar thing and then I miss every pass. Like, we don't see it, and yet we're held to it. I have to outperform, be responsible, carry all the weight of like a legacy, and not a weight, but like the privilege of, you know, stepping into that. But, you know, there's the positive and there's the, why is it so different for admin? Why is it so allowed? And it shouldn't be. And as a young artist, you're seeing it and you have to decide, and we all make a choice. In any area as a performing artist, you're making a choice by being an artist to be at the bottom rung, because there's capitalism. There's someone profiting over you as a piece of entertainment. And then you're also representing old works that never are meant to sort of be that broken thing that shows humanity. Hey, remember, this is not okay. Like, and then here's a mirror and here's all that. Anyway.
Yeah, no,
that's why this is a tough call. Normally, if we get one shot, we're fired. It's over. There's no coming back. And so it deserves to be a raised question. Rehabilitate, but maybe not on our dime. Like, we need to find people who are prepared to deal with this.
Right.
I think that
I want to share a little bit more of her post, because I think, I mean, first of all, you know, Tanya Radwa is not only a singer, but also a scholar. And so some of how she puts things is so poignant. And I just want to share her words and not kind of make up my own version of them. So she's talking about, you know, having to deal with that emotional labor of addressing these issues. And then going away from it. And she talked about, which is so poignant, for them, life simply returned to normal, and the racial violence they caused had no effect on their professional reality. And on my end, I was wrestling with the fear of being labeled a problem singer, as we talked about in this panel, and that I would never again be hired in opera for speaking up. And then she talked about something that I think is so important, and it gets to our discussion of Porgy and Bess. She says, last season, the company staged the world premiere of an opera about police brutality, but paired that with showboat. As Black performers, we moved between one rehearsal process where we had to relive the real trauma of police murdering Black people to another where we had to hold the trauma of hearing our white peers call us the N-word in every performance. She says, active anti-racism is real work, and we cannot lose sight of the fact that institutions are doing this work because Black people died. Predominantly white institutions like the Glimmer Glass Festival need to keep sight of the fact that they are embarking on this anti-racist work because it was in fact paid for by the murder of Black lives. I think that it is such a poignant point, because it gets to what a lot of you guys are talking about, is that if we're always responding only when society or when, you know, a certain group of people are forcing you to respond, then you're doing it on their backs, because something has had to happen wrong to that group of people in order for you to actually respond. And so I guess my question, and maybe Andrew, you and I are both folks who have been to Glimmer Glass, and I've had a lot of lovely experiences at Glimmer Glass, you know, but I never, ever will excuse this kind of experience, you know, and that's why I felt it was very important that I got to the bottom of it. I also was texting the artistic director of the festival this morning, who confirmed that they will be responding to her her Facebook post at their town hall meeting they have coming up on, I think, June 18th. But Andrew, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts around that, you know, the responsibility of these institutions, most of which are opera, are predominantly white, to anticipate these societal issues, these microaggressions, as opposed to only responding to them once they've already happened and a person or persons have been harmed.
That is a lot to think about. You know, it is hard for me to discuss this objectively, because I know the person involved and we are friends. So it is difficult for me to speak about it, I think, like, as partial. However, I will say the longer that I've been in this career too, the lower and lower my threshold for this kind of stuff gets, because I see it too often. I experience it. I see it impact many more people than me. To you know, in the grand scheme of things too, like the microaggressions and all that stuff, it's relatively low key for Asian people. It's still annoying and disrespectful, but it's still relatively low key for us. I have no idea the gravity of some of these other things, and it already pisses me off beyond belief when it happens to me. I can't imagine what it's like in that situation. So I think people need to be doing better. The business needs to be doing better. And I think, one way to do that is to put more people of color in administrative positions. And the problem is I don't know how we start that. It's going to require some people to give up something and lose something so someone else can have it, because I don't see any other way at this point. We don't have bargaining chips right now. What, we're going to get people to stop coming to the theater? We can't do that right now because it's already happening, or are we going to stop working for them? Well, none of us are working right now, so it's going to take some people just simply doing better.
Absolutely. Kenny.
Okay, so when I've done Romeo and Juliet, we would have hours of sword fight training from a sword fight specialist. When I've done Carmen, I've seen a specialist come in and teach her how to use the castanets properly. When I've done Turandot, people have shown me how to properly do the fan work and the movements to get them right. When the Me Too thing happened, there were people who came into the room and talked to us for hours and hours about what's appropriate. We have to have the same thing when it comes time for Black shows, if you want Black bodies on stage making green money. At this particular festival, that particular season, there were 2 shows that required Black bodies that told Black stories. And in both of those pieces, the N-word, which I despise, is used. Actually, in the very beginning of Showboat, it's the first thing that the Black people are referred to. It's, hey, N-word. That's it. That's the first utterance to those characters. And so if an administration that does not currently employ African Americans or other people of color, then in your planning of these pieces and reading the score and the script, understanding and having that sensitivity, in your planning the year or 2 before, also plan to have experts in sensitivity training for those types of things.
Absolutely.
And you don't necessarily have to have a Black staff to do that. You just have to be aware. You have to be conscious. You have to have a vibration that the people on the stage are not just there to make you money. They're living, breathing human beings that, again, have to carry the weight and the emotion of that piece when the curtain comes down and the applause stops.
Right.
There's weight that comes with it.
Yeah.
After it's over, but we have to fix it before it starts.
Yeah.
And the thing about, I don't think we need to take the place of people who are currently in administration. We just need to make the table bigger so that others can have a seat too. There's room for everyone. There's room for every voice. I don't want anybody to not eat, because I want to eat too. Let's come to the table and see how we can all eat. That's what I want.
Absolutely. Julia, you wanted to say something? Thank you, Kenny. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. And just in referring back to the Me Too movement, and yes, some of the firing that happened did seem very abrupt, very rash. But you know what? As we were just reading, casualties happened. And so there will be casualties in the response. And and over time, we'll see who actually has learned and recovered. But I'm not saying that the punishment fits the crime here, but again, there has never been even an addressing of there's never even been an admittance of crimes happening. And I was really surprised. I will share this, and I last summer when I was at Opera Theater St. Louis, we were in an all-black cast on stage, right? There were so many stories that I heard from the young performers that I was working with who were so upset. They were just like, Julia, do you think that this is weird that this was said to me in a coaching? I was like, yeah, I do. Do you think that this is weird that this was said to me 4 years ago in a masterclass, public masterclass, in front of a bunch of donors? Yeah, I do. And after the fourth one, I was like, you know what? I went to the administration and I said, I'd like to set up a meeting with the young artists here. I think they have some things they need to tell you that they have not been able to tell anyone yet before. And they're confused. They're not sure if they have a quote unquote case. Amazingly, most of these statements came from one individual who was already resigning because of some other allegations that were brought against him.
Yep.
But they said in the meeting, it was said, no report had ever been made against this particular person. And even and it let me know, what that let me know, because the things that these students who had been there for several years, right? It let me know there was a culture at Opera Theater St. Louis of this sort of behavior. There was a culture of it that was accepted by everyone.
Right. Right. And that's can be said for the entire industry, really.
Yes. Listen, like Opera Theater St. Louis has been very proactive in addressing their addressing their issues around racism and diversity, especially after the death of Mike Brown in Ferguson.
Yeah.
And when the Black Lives Matter movement came onto the international newsreel. Okay. So they have been like really, really active meeting with community organizers. I've been to some of these meetings with these people.
Yeah, you and I performed on one of the Mike Brown events.
Yes, we did. But like, they are meeting with community organizers in St. Louis to talk about how St. Louis can do better, the opera company can do better by the community, by the Black community, by any community that is feeling demoralized and abandoned. Okay, so the issue of firing, it's not the only answer here. That's not what we're talking about. It's like we all want healing to happen. Ideally, re-education of people's mindsets to happen. Absolutely. But sometimes for that to happen, there has to be a complete, like a breaking open and an admittance that there was a real wrong.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Julia. So I know we all have a lot of thoughts. And in fact, I would love to even get to some more comments from the chat, but we're approaching a time boundary. And so what I think is going to be helpful for us is if we go to a performance by Julia, and then during that performance, I'll gauge where people are in terms of what time you guys have. And then we'll know how we're going to proceed after that. But I think we do need to pause. I want to respect people's time. So why don't we go to that performance, and you and we will chat as a panel, in the secrecy of the video. And we'll come back with a defined plan for everyone watching. But Julie, if you want to introduce what the performance is.
Sure. I'm feeling very torn introducing this because I feel like we're getting involved in a conversation here. But yes, yes, I will introduce this.
I mean, I think it's important though. It's very pertinent, actually, the subject matter.
Okay. Well, this song that is about to be played, I first programmed in 2014 for my debut recital tour, and it was put in the second half, in the middle of this program, where all of the material was focused around the demoralization of Black women specifically. This is a lullaby, and as with all lullabies, the words and the music are there to comfort the person singing it as much as it is to comfort the person being sung to. And the song is Brown Baby, written by Oscar Brown. This arrangement was inspired by a version that Nina Simone, an interpretation of Nina Simone's, and arranged by myself and a dear friend, Jeremy Siskind. The only change from the original setting of this, arrangement of this from 2014 till now, is that the opening line that I sing a cappella, I removed initially. That was originally in the center of the song, but I decided not to perform it in that recital. But when I was thinking about performing this song around this time, I decided to put that line and bring it absolutely to the forefront.
Great, thank you. So this is Brown Baby by Oscar Brown Jr.
When out of men's hearts hate is hurled, maybe, baby, you'll live in a better world. Brown baby, brown baby, as you grow up, I want you to drink from the plenty cup. I want you to stand up tall and proud, and I want you to speak up clear and loud. Brown baby, brown baby, brown baby, as years go by, I want you to go with your head up high. I want you to live by the justice code, and I want you to walk down freedom's road. Brown baby, so
Thank you, Julia, for that gorgeous performance. And I will tell you that your performance of Brown Baby is, I did the subtitles for it, and listening to it over and over, it's just one of the most haunting things I've heard in a long time. So that's why we were not going to cut that. I refuse. And one of one of the most touching and emotional lines is the speaker saying, "It makes me glad that you're going to have things that I never had." And that's why I thought it was so important to include that in our discussion, because that's what we all want, right? The reason we put ourselves through this emotional labor, the reasons we become more informed on these subjects as leaders in the industry, is because we just hope that Brandon, or I'm sure Kenny hopes for me, I hope for Brandon, and Brandon hopes for the people who come after him, that it's going to be just a little bit better each time. So thank you is my point. And thank Christian who played with such sensitivity. So we chatted, everyone watching, and we're going to add 30 more minutes to the panel discussion before we conclude, because we do think it's important that we continue to unpack some of these ideas. Having this group of folks together is not something that happens every day. We're usually all, different states, different countries performing and doing our own thing. But with the combination of COVID and the horrible atrocities that are happening in society right now, and the virtual platform, it all came together to make this possible. So we want to use it as productively as we can. I wanted to see if Dr. André, if you had something else you wanted to say on the previous subject, and then I also wanted to discuss some questions from the live chat.
For everyone for being here, and for the audience too. There's something so historic and important with what's happening right now, because we have people of color in opera. We have some representation from across a wide spectrum, not everyone, but I so appreciate this coalition building and what's happening. I need to hear, what is it like for an Asian man to have nobody to say, "Oh, you are the next so-and-so"? That was eye-opening for me. I appreciate it when Eileen Pérez is saying, "I am burning here," even though you look so calm and regal. I am burning here because this has happened and it continues to happen. And I just want to say thank you for sharing this, because these are the things that happen behind the scenes. Brandon, I so appreciate your showing us that these are not topics we can talk about at all points of our career. I'm so honored to be a part of this, because I'm not an opera singer. I mean, I sing for fun, and I've read treatises and all of that. So I feel I understand and have immense gratitude for the heroism you guys are performing. But I'm a professor, and so I need to hear these stories so I can tell other people. It's not fair to put all this work on you guys. And hearing about having Showboat and Blue, I know the Glimmerglass did this last year, in the same season without there being sensitivity training about what it means, the work, the labor that's put on the bodies out there, and just also how creepy it might be to be in the audience and to watch this and to have nobody explain this, like have the program notes, have the lobby notes, have the meeting conversation, have something. So I mean, I wasn't there, but just to hear this is, we do need this type of training. As there
Absolutely.
are intimacy coaches, we need to have people who say, "No, please do not touch my locks. They are not the petting zoo," as
Right.
mentioned. So I just want to and I will stop this rant, but what is happening right here is so historic. Derrell, thank you. And all of you incredible artists, thank you for making the time. You are so important for making a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. And one thing that I love about your comments is this idea of those particular operas together in one season without sensitivity training. You know, that's something that, again, on paper, and again, Francesca, I know her, she's a very, very smart woman. But as Andrew says, this is something that I think that if there were a Black person on staff, and you tell them the subject matter of Blue, and you tell them we're going to do this with Showboat, a Black person on your staff is going to tell you, it's like, okay, this is what you need. Give me until tomorrow. I'll have you 12 bullet points of the kind of training we need, the kind of discussions we need to have around these operas if you want to have them. If I were on the staff, I would say, don't do Showboat at all. I think Showboat, this is my personal opinion, I don't think Showboat should ever be performed. Again, I don't care how gorgeous the music is. I don't care how reminiscent, nostalgic it makes you. It is racist, and the show does nothing to resolve the racial elements. That is a problem. Okay?
And I think it's a totally relevant thing to ask. Should we do these shows? What do we need to do them if they are canonical and important? We need to talk about them because it's not 1927.
Right. Okay, so let's go to some questions from the live chat. Some of these questions we can really dig into. If some others feel like, you know, it's a one-word answer here and there, I think that's fine, but I want to address them since we're all in community here. So this is very relevant to the discussion we're having. For real, this person says, this is Veronica Williams. Thank you, Veronica, for your question. How do we deal with and emotionally address the guilt of putting up with whatever horrid individual experiences we put up with or allowed? How do we deal with that guilt? I think it gets back, you know, it's a commentary on Tayaradsa's post, but also that earlier question we were talking about of the resentment we start to feel within ourselves when we're having to dismiss certain elements of why something is problematic, but we do it anyway. And so I'll put this to, let's go to Karen and then Eileen and then Kenny to talk about maybe some strategies you have for dealing with any guilt you feel, or if you don't feel guilt, I mean, that's fine too. I mean, I think some people, you are so strategic in how you approach something that you never feel guilt after the fact because you just know what you want and that's the only thing you accept.
I'll let one of them go first.
Okay, Eileen.
I want to ask Julia at the same time, if possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, so I don't know, maybe because I know you're younger and like, I feel like in the education system, the possibilities are so open and like, it's at least the demographic or the diplomacy looks a lot different than when you transition to the business side. So I feel that, well, now I get off track. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Doctor.
That's okay. Can you want us to come back to you?
Yeah, well, I just repeat it again because I just lost my concentration. I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay. So Veronica was asking that, you know, the guilt that we might feel for putting up with some of the horrible experiences and not really feeling courageous enough to maybe bring it, like as Tanya Ratua has done with this post. A lot of us over the years have felt like if I do something like that, if I go to administration, they won't hire me back. And so,
there's validity. That's valid, and that's so valid. And what I think the reason why I was like leaning towards Julia is because I feel like maybe that she's seeing even a newer or a fresher jump of that bridge into the professional world, where like just being, you know, out and singing 5 years is different than like me who's been out there for a while. So, but that's gonna happen. You have to have your community of what we say are allies, but you also have to be really use your discretion. And I think that unfortunately the business hasn't evolved to that level yet. So you really have to you lean into your friendships, but you do have to find those communities or get creative into those people. Have to be on one hand. You know, you should be able to count them. And as you go in, and as Karen and I, we were talking, you called me in to be an agent of mentoring and advocacy. So as we're having these conversations now, I could say that we're just, you know, Karen, I know you have, that's always been the person and the artist that you have stepped into that role quite early on. So I want to say that we're here, we're learning, we're listening, but the world is, you know, what you're going through is difficult. There has to be maybe a therapist involved with you personally, because as you are narrating, you're coming up with excuses for other people as a person from your background. So you have to learn how to see clearly and not excuse and not dismiss those instincts, and to get a little bit better view as to why you're shaped that way, and then to embrace and find more of a choice that you make. And
yeah, sure. It's in a way like not to be victim blaming, because then we like she said, we come up with excuses for why people treat us certain ways. So then, you know, well, maybe if I wasn't so tall, you know, everyone is always, why you have to be so tall? Well, maybe if I wasn't so tall, people wouldn't say I was so tall. If I wasn't so black, people wouldn't say. So then you start to, you know, what I talked about earlier, you know, self-hate. So we have to be careful of that. I do know Francesca very well, and I would say at Glimmerglass Opera, and I would say, you know, for the leaders of her type, that some of them you can go to. My godmother, I kept saying to myself, like, you know, conversations like this, I want to make my godmother proud, because my godmother, Dr. Bernice Mills, took me in when I was 16, 17, and she's the reason I went to college. Between her and my godfather, they're the reason that I went to college, because they had all matriculated through college, master's degrees, doctorates. And my godmother always told me, said, don't waste time talking to the person that has to go talk to the person that has to go talk to the other person to get an answer to filter back down to you, or to trickle back down to you. You go to that person who has the answer. So I would say in some cases, you know, some some general directors do make themselves available to the company, and the company being not just administration, but the artists as well. And Francesca has been one of those that has made herself available. And, you know, but to the others, you know, like, go to them. And if you, honestly, if you really feel like that you can't, then come to some of us. Just like the young artist did with Julia at Opera Theater St. Louis. They went to her. So
yeah, and if you go to them and they don't respond, put them on blast. You know, and I agree with you about Francesca.
And then keep going further.
She responded in a couple of seconds. So
and I know she's the type that she'll say, "Fix it," like she'll get it done. She'll scream to that. But come to us, and then we'll go to Dr. André, and we'll, you know, something will be resolved.
Right.
But we can't carry that. We can't carry that guilt. We can't carry it, because it's only going to take us further and further into a hole. We have to talk about it.
Yeah, have to address it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just, Eileen, I was really hearing you in terms of just the needing to feel safe to report. That's why I think, you know, it's like the feelings of guilt, if that's how you want to frame it, that could come on later, is like, the reason why probably is because you simply did not feel safe to report. That is actually not your fault. I will say, I was also very strategic in how I came to Opera Theater St. Louis with this. I went to a woman who is a person of color, who was on the administration. And she was the one who was helping gather this information together and then presented it later to the rest of the administration. So, and it was taken very seriously, I know this, but it's like I also, because I have to feel, you know, I've had to work, I think I've said this before, I have had to negotiate this world for a long time. We have all had to negotiate this for a long time. Some of us have gotten very, very skilled at it because of our life circumstances. And others have not had to build a technique, you know? And I have to call it, it's almost like, it's like building a technique to deal with it. But this is the other deal. It's like, why are we putting the pressure on ourselves to build a technique for a learning system that is so damaging? No more.
Yes, no more. Yes. Thank you, Julia. Kenny or Karen, did you guys have any quick comments on that? I want to get to some more questions as well.
I think you should get to more questions. I think they said what they need.
Okay, yeah, okay, great. Similar to that in terms of what are the solutions, a board member, Phil Meyer, what can we as people on the boards of smaller opera companies, and I would say also of larger or mid-size and larger opera companies, do to help address these concerns that you're so movingly speaking about? What can board members do?
Just like, I'm sorry, go ahead. Just.
Karen, go.
Go ahead.
Let's start with Karen, yeah.
Bring your friends who don't look like you.
Yes!
To the board. Make sure that your board doesn't have all of these stipulations and boxes that they have to put on in order for people to come to the board and stay on the board, because that oftentimes what happens is that Black people, Asian people, people of color, whatever you call yourself, come to these boards, but they don't stay for whatever reason. Make your house warm and welcoming for people to want to stay. You ever go over somebody's house and you feel like you're not wanted? What is the first thing?
Yes.
At the front door, like, how do I get the hell out of here?
Right.
Let's not do that anymore. And also when there's time, when the time comes up to choose who will be the leader of your company, you need to make sure that the search committee understands not that you don't just want white people running your company. The search committee needs to find the best person to run your company. Right. If they're yellow, orange, green, blue, black, whatever that is, the culture of the board needs to change.
Yes, I agree. And one thing I would add to that is that, this may be a radical point of view, but we are so deficient right now in terms of leaders of colors, specifically Black leaders, since we're doing Blue and freaking Showboat in one summer and we have no Black artistic directors, that it is okay, boards. I promise you it is okay. It happens all the time in universities, happens all the time in other sectors. It's okay to say, we are going to hire a Black artistic director. We are going to hire an artistic director who's below the age of 45. That is within your purview as a board. So have the courage to make those kinds of decisions to add not only to your organization, but to the industry at large. Soloman, you wanted to say something?
Well, Karen pretty much said what I was going to say. In society, we can stand up for the rights for everyone. Everyone's fighting for women to be able to choose what they want to do with their bodies. So it's like, men stay out of their bodies, stay out of their decision, their choice. So then, they invite more women to speak up for it because, so the same thing needs to happen for us. If you want a certain type of representation, you won't have that with someone else speaking for you. So the same way you want to fight for, in order for, for women's rights or for anything, you bring someone from that particular persuasion, that background, that gender, that whatever it is. It's the same thing that has to happen for us. So you can't continue to think that it's okay to speak for us. Let us speak for ourselves. And I wish I would have had, I want to connect you with a board member he's on the board for Washington Ballet, for Apollo Theater, chairman of the board for WPA. His name is Reggie Van Lee, African-American man. that goes in and changes things for the better. And it's not, and he danced with Ailyn, so he is, of knowledge of the arts. He's not just coming in. We are qualified. If we are trusted to be some of the great singers, then we just had a black president, one of the most articulate. Like, we are qualified. You just have to do it.
Right.
Or
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that means that, not just these folks advising or teaching the table, but actually being at the table as
leading,
the decision makers as well.
Being there, yeah.
Kenny, and then Andrew.
I think the boardroom should represent what you want the company on stage to look like. It should look like what the administrative offices should look like. And you should hold your general and executive director and your artistic director to the task when you don't see diversity on stage or in the pit or on the podium. You as the board, as the pocket strings of the company, need to say, hey, what's up? Why are there no Asian people this season? Why are there no Hispanic people this season? Why are there no Black people this season? As the board, you need to step that up. And you have to insist that your board members not just be on the board for a status symbol, for a tax write-off. They need to be emotionally, physically, and financially invested in the growth of the company to make it look like the community that it serves.
Great. Andrew?
Just like for the reason, like another reason to diversify a board or just incorporate more people of color is what we're seeing right now, hopefully, and this is a lasting thing, is people acknowledging implicit racial bias just because of circumstance of your life. If you're surrounded by a certain group of people that looks a certain way, that's going to be the first thing that comes to mind. You cannot, if you're not exposing yourself to other perspectives, to people that look different than you, you're never going to have that come to the front of your those people present. Just starting a dialogue, communication to open yourself to that perspective, to normalize it in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to throw in a question that is very similar to this one, and this comes from Camille Marie Sherman. She says, my thoughts on where companies get their money and how most are continuing to be funded by white, conservative, and often racist donors, especially in an economic climate where the industry is threatened because of COVID. Many companies say we'd love to change, but we'll lose our funding and therefore slip away from being held accountable. There's some question marks in there, but I guess the grander question is that legitimate? I will start the answering by saying absolutely not. I think, and again, this may be radical, is that if those are your donors and you are afraid that if you were to hold your board accountable, hold your staff accountable, hold your programming accountable, that you would lose the funding so much that it would preclude your company from existing, then your company does not need to exist. Not today. We're already oversaturated in terms of company. If your company is not adding to the narrative of furthering justice, then your company does not need to exist. So if you cannot figure out the strategy in order to get donors, and if you know certain donors are going to leave your company, you leave your board or leave your patronage, then you do not deserve to be leading a company. These are the facts. These are the facts. Dr. André, did you want to add something to that discussion?
Board members who asked the question and for who are listening now, please realize that your actions are important. It's becoming a funding priority to have these plans, to start looking at diversity and equity and inclusion. And so if you have local donors who are hesitant with that, watch out. I also just want to give a quick little comment. I was on the board of a small regional Midwestern orchestra. And this was 2016 with the election. And when I tried to speak up about things, trying to say that the arts is a place where people can come together, I was told after a board meeting that they accepted my resignation. I said I didn't resign. And it was the treasurer and the board, the chair. We accept your resignation, but I didn't resign. And so know that some boards are sick, and they, meaning like there's a cancer and a toxicity that they don't want to hear what's going on. I'm trying to change this now, as I've in a position where maybe somebody wants me to be on a board or something, but the diversity, it has to come from the board. I just want to let you know there's some reasons why it doesn't sometimes. And when you say they're people of color and then they disappear, they might be resigned. It's so frustrating.
Yeah. Wow. Quickly, Kenny, we have a comment that came in. People want to know how they can get more information on Opera Noir. So can you give a quick plug?
Yeah, you can email me on our Opera Noir of New York Facebook page, or at opera_noir, NOIRE, at yahoo.com.
And write a check.
And write a check. Okay, so I think we're going to move to the last question. Dr. André, seeing you here, I just tell you, this is such a thrilling experience. And I want to just tell one story, since we're talking about boards and everything. Last year, when we did the first series of community conversations, Dr. André, again, was the featured speaker for equity and diversity in the arts. And I remember after that conversation going to Pont de Marne in Long Beach, and it was Dr. André, me, some more members of our staff, most members of our board, which happens to be all white right now, and we're working very hard to change that, but all of them were there. A young, Black, wealthy, potential board member was there, as was the Latina, the Filipino, and the other Black artists, along with Larry Brownlee. We were all in there eating Thai food, and it was shared, it was family style, and just that picture for me was like, this is what needs to be the beginning of starting to really diversify not only the makeup of these boards and administrations, but what they know, their knowledge base, being able to talk not only to Larry Brownlee, who's, famous, or Dr. André, who's smart, but also these young artists of different ethnic groups, all being around the table. Everyone matters. I wish we would get away from this idea that directors are more important, or conductors are more important, or administrators are more important. We're all colleagues. We're all in the fight together. We're all trying to produce art because we realize its power.
So powerful.
Anyway, so thank you, Dr. André. Last question, and this question is not one for discussion. This is just one that I want to end our panel discussion with, because I think it's a powerful commentary on how far we have to go as an industry. So for all of the panelists, imagine your ideal opera community. An opera community that makes you proud, in which you wake up every day and you say, yes, I'm going to go to work, get the work done, engage with my colleagues, create beautiful art for the audience. Now come back to reality. Which elements from your vision are most deficient or wholly absent within our current art form? I'll say that one more time. From your ideal opera community, which elements from your vision are most deficient or wholly absent within our current art form? I'm going to go in alphabetical order for this one. So why don't we start with the youngest of the group, Brandon?
I would say that what happens on stage and who is on stage directly reflects and represents the communities that we are a part of. I would say that there is diversity of experience and thought behind the audition table and in these offices, and that there is direct engagement with folks of different backgrounds in these communities, and that we are inviting them into our auditoriums and letting them know that opera is a space for them as well.
Great. Julia? You're muted, Julia. There you are.
Education has to be at the center of our value system. The decisions across our field that are based on presumptions instead of research and careful consideration has to change. And that we have to increase this narrow threshold of entry into our field.
Great. Kenny?
That arts education becomes a priority and not just an elective or a privilege, that every child of every color in every neighborhood receives it. Two, that the works of Anthony Davis, Terence Blanchard, Daniel Romaine are in the same rotation as Mozart, Puccini, Verdi, and Strauss. And three, that we have on stage, in the makeup room, in the costume department, in the administration offices, people that look like what America calls itself, and that is the great melting pot of the world.
Absolutely. Eileen?
Empowering on a national level. We've done a good job of creating and educating this new generation of singers and artists, and for all of those types of position, I would love to see more diversity among administration and leadership, qualified by and through having created and been a part of a multicultural experience, connecting the community and the audience. Minimum 2 years before you're even in a leadership position. And then for the national level, I would love to see more ethnic diversity among lead roles given to American artists. Period.
And I some of the things we talked about already, but for me, it's true and equal community outreach, singing in companies or in theaters, small theaters, big theater, large theaters, and seeing some of the kids that come in and then hearing from family members or mentors growing up that are teachers in some of the communities that I come, one that I come from, and them saying, "Oh, we had no idea that that this theater was doing this thing for students," and it's because sometimes we automatically assume that certain communities will not be interested when they are. I mean, I'm a product of the fact that there is an interest, there is a strong desire, and also there is a gift within us to be able to get us to those stages. So, like I said, true and equal community outreach, absolute inclusivity, where not just behind the scenes, behind the scenes, from administration all the way down, and in the orchestra as well. A lot of us are gifted instrumentalists as well, I think I just said that more. I would love to see even more diversity on the actual podium. Music directors, but on the podium.
Great.
So that's how I feel.
Karen?
I would like to see three things: more women in leadership, more women in leadership through administration, more women in leadership on boards, more women on leadership in the podium, more women composers. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see, when I turn the house lights up, I'd like to see diversity in age, race, sexual preference, whatever that is for you. I'd like to see all of us collectively as a community experiencing the beauty that is opera. And I'd like to see the community embrace their opera company and their theater as the people's house. It is your house. This is your theater. This is your orchestra hall. This is wherever your art is being done. This is your house. And that when people walk through the front door, that they know that they have ownership over it. And that's what I'd like to see.
Awesome. Andrew?
I would love to see representation in the business. I don't think there's enough representation yet. I did not come up in the business identifying or seeing anybody that looks like me doing it. I want to see an Asian person as a household name. But most of all, I want to see people who look like all of us in all facets of it everywhere.
Great. Dr. André?
Everything I was going to say. I want to see a wider representation in administration and directing different operas. I want to see what it's like to have adventurous casting, courageous casting, people where we can understand different things. I want to see the education reaching out. I want to see all these ideas about having people in the community of the board, in the community of people on stage, in the orchestra too. How do we talk about these issues of inclusion? And then the big thing is, I really want to see the audience look like where my friends are happy to go without me dragging them along. I want to see more of us, and I love this idea of the People's House, the People's Orchestra. Amen.
Yes. Thank you all so much. If I were to have an ideal world, it would include a lot more young people. The TikTok folks would be there. Young Black people would be there. There would be parties. There would be leading roles. Aaron Crouch would be one of the leading tenors. Alan Williams would be one of the leading baritones. Chandler Johnson would be an artistic administrator. Afton Battle would be a director of development. Kenny Overton would be an artistic administrator or an artistic director. Gordon Hawkins would be a general director of a company. Karen Slack would be an administrative position. Anthony Davis, as you said, DBR, both would be performed very frequently. New, young, Black, and other composers of color would have their works constantly performed at the major A houses of the world. Thanos would come into our operatic environment, snap his fingers, and half of the mediocre white leaders of some of our companies would magically slip into other positions, and they would be replaced by Black, Asian, Hispanic leaders in those same positions. I think it is so deficient that that's how extreme the move needs to be. And so my message to a lot of you out there is that if there is an opportunity for you to create or cultivate a position for someone of color, particularly a Black person, because I think it's so important that more Black people are in leadership, do it. If you are in a position where you can step down from your position in an artistic director position or general director position or board position, step down and ensure that someone of color is coming in after you. If you are thinking about retirement in any time in the near future, retire and find something that even may pay the same amount of money, but ensure that the person coming into your position is someone of color. That is my dream world, and it would go on and on and on. I am so grateful to all of you panelists for being here. I am grateful to John Holiday and Solomon Howard and Julia Bullock and Christian Reif and Kevin Miller for the fantastic performances. I've spent so much time with, just really absorbing the content of what you guys were going to perform. And I to tell you, it just fits so perfectly with this discussion, which I think is both a commentary on your artistry, but also your sophistication in terms of really making these ideas align with how you present yourself to the world. I also am very grateful to Eric Bridges, who has been the production director for this event. There has been a lot of work that has gone into the production element. So thank you, Eric. Thank you to all my LBO colleagues who are in the comments, making sure everything goes smoothly, who have helped to put this together. Thank you for all of you who are viewing this. It's so important that you're listening. It's so important that you're absorbing. It's so important that you're letting this cook and simmer. And then most important, that you act. That you act. As we've said time and time again then during this discussion, this is labor. This is emotional labor. This is time commitment. This is mental labor. This takes sophistication of understanding, of experience. All of that is our gift to you to now take and do something with it. I know a lot of you have power to really do something, and I implore you to find the courage within yourself to take the necessary actions. And if you don't know what those are, contact me, contact Dr. André, contact Kenny, contact Karen, contact anyone on this panel or any informed Black or person of color that you know in your life. And I promise you that their sophistication of understanding of these topics is so vast that they would have some first preliminary steps for you. With that, I want to go to our final performance, which is just going to be an audio performance with our last clip, which gives you the next season for LBO, which is the season of solidarity. And this is a performance by John Holiday performing Minstrel Man. To fling my, Minstrel Man is because my mouth is wide with laughter and my throat is deep with song. You did not think I suffer after I've held my pain so long. Because my mouth is wide with laughter, you do not hear, and my feet are gay with dancing. You do not hear my inner cry. This is John Holiday, and I just kind of messed with those lyrics a little bit, but the core message is there. John Holiday, thank you. John and Kevin Miller, thank you all for coming. Thank you, panelists. I look forward to being on the stages with some of you. I look forward to being on administrative staff with some of you. I look forward to being in the audience with you guys. Goodbye. Thank you for coming.
Because my mouth is wide with laughter, and my throat is deep with song. You do not think I suffer after I have held my pain so long. Because